RC said that they are a left above knee amputee since March 10th and that their lanyard socket keeps spinning. They said if I add socks, they don't get deep enough and it still spins, and this is their second socket.
With above the knee sockets, we have to contain the tissues and then have an appropriate ischial seat where like your sit bone is on your socket, and then it really has to like cup your leg and go, the lateral trim line has to go up and really get a good grasp of your limb to get that control in all planes. And then if it continues spinning, sometimes people put a pad in, like, I'm trying to not go too technical with it, but it's like the front medial side of the socket, there's like the inguinal triangle. They like to put pads in there, and then that sometimes keeps the socket from shifting just to kind of get a lock in that situation. Because it sounds like it's a socket fit problem, like the shape of the socket that's making it rotate, more than like a sock ply issue. So.
I say so. That's always the first thing, right? So, yep.
He also said technical is okay. They work in healthcare.
Oh, okay.
So,
Awesome. So the first thing always is going to be to try sock ply, right? You're going to come into the office and your prosthetist is generally going to ask you, what have you already tried to help rectify this? I would say if adding a sock ply makes things too tight, I have had some patients that tend to be a little bit more active, and when they fire your rectus femoris, so one of your quads, that can actually expand into the socket too if there's not enough relief and cause some rotation. So if the socket's too tight, that can occur. If that's not the case, if it feels like things are loose, like Cassie was saying, the brim, making sure that that ischium, kind of your sit bone, is well contained, has a lot of good support, that the medial aspect kind of comes up into that perineal tissue, so kind of up into the groin, not to impinge anything that we don't want to pinch, but just enough to contain all of that tissue. And then the other option would be, if socket fit and everything is good, sometimes adding a belt can help just control that rotation also. All right, so RC also added a pad on the first one, and that still, oh, sorry, RC added, RC is a female. Cut a sock to see if you only needed half. So adding the sock for a half ply, I'm assuming that didn't help then either. Nope, okay.
They also have, I don't know what kind of lanyard system you're using, but they have a system where you cut a hole in the socket, basically, and then they glue some adapter to the outside of your liner, and then you feed the strap through that, and then that kind of keeps it from rotating too. And I've seen like a ratchet design where they, when you go in the socket, it just kind of ratchets down, and then that would keep your leg essentially from rotating in the socket. Like, you could always try that also, yeah.
Okay, and also has a history of Ehlers-Danlos. I would say even with Ehlers-Danlos though, so with any sort of laxity, like if the socket's rotating on you, I don't anticipate that that would really contribute to that. I would say, so when you're standing on the socket, one, do you feel like you have some support kind of up on the sit bone, that has good pressure? And then throughout the socket, does it feel like things are just as snug at the top as they are at the bottom? Or does the socket pressure, does it seem like it changes throughout the socket? And then just with this too, because I know rotation can be a tricky thing. There are some patients that I know we've had to work with that always deal with some sort of rotation of the socket, and we've tried adding like material inside the socket that kind of helps reduce rotation, changing the brim. A lot of it that can help is actually, so more for the prosthetist out there, with fleshier limbs, of trying to do more of like a modified quad. So you're turning, instead of this round shape where you're not containing things, of having more of a square shape with a lot of kind of AP, or like front to back compression. And so that helps just kind of manipulate the tissue in a slightly different way to help reduce the rotation. So that's something that we've kind of had some success with, just if you have a little bit more of fleshy tissue. Because with everything, I mean, it's kind of like trying to stabilize the stick in a bowl of Jell-O, right? So our tissue kind of moves around, it's not super stable, and you're trying to hold all that in one place without really choking you out of the socket and making sure like it's way too tight. RC also said, right now the lanyard comes from the bottom, files through the bottom, has support and feels snug, but gets a little bit of pressure at the bottom with slight bruising. Okay. Still on a trial 3D printed socket, haven't determined which type of socket would be best. So that's great as far as trialing sockets and different kind of designs and having a prosthetist that works through a lot of that with you. As long as your prosthetist is being receptive and working with you to try and figure this out, I think there's a lot of options that they can kind of continue to explore, and then asking them some questions too of just make sure that you're honest with your prosthetist and continue to kind of bring up these issues. Don't push it off. I always tell people that during the test socket fitting process, that's the time to be nitpicky. Because that's the best time for anybody to fix it, and you don't end up in a socket that's, oh gosh, I can't wear this, or I have these problems, or I wish I would have said something. Of your prosthetist should be receptive to the information at that time too, of just trying to work through things with you.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like some people get in the office and they're like, oh, I forgot what I was going to tell you, and just always like write it down when you're thinking about it around the house, like, oh, I really want this out of my leg, or I really want to be able to do this, because I've had plenty of patients after I finally deliver their finished socket, and then they're like, hey, you know, I really wanted a sandal toe foot, and I'm like, oh, well, that would be an easy thing for me to do, but I didn't know, you know. It's kind of one of those things, we don't know, you know yourself the best and what you want the best, and we just want to make you happy, so it's good to write it down and let us know.
Definitely trialing things and playing around. Have 3D printers in your home. Awesome. Hubby and friends are all trying different things. Thank you for the direction. Awesome. Well, RC, I hope this helps you out a little bit. I'm glad that you have somebody that's working with you to kind of try a few different things here. It's one of the things that it makes such a big difference just in terms of outcomes. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings when it comes to test socket fittings, and you get very used to what you've had before and how things are going, and a lot of people come in and they're just like, oh gosh, this process again. And I know it's a necessary evil, but it definitely helps getting a good and proper fit in the end of things.